How did that happen?
I remember being so unhappy there, in the happiest place in the world.
So, you know when you go into a graveyard? Guys, welcome back to the Business Mutiny podcast. Today we've got James Gardner in, who is an acquisition expert, a coach, mentor, and owns a funeral home that's been around for over 250 years. We're going to learn all about coaching, mentoring, goal setting, and what went right and what went wrong. So let's dive in. James, thanks for being here. You run two very different businesses, a coaching firm and a 250-year-old funeral home. How did that happen?
It's a good question, John. Thanks very much for allowing me to be here today and on your show. It's really exciting. Let's answer the second question first. So what I like to do if I'm talking on stage and things like that is when I'm speaking to entrepreneurs, I always get them to put their hands up and see who's the youngest person in the room that started their entrepreneurial journey, and that's, for me, it's when you've got money from somebody that's not a family member. So your mum and dad don't count, but if you've gone around, washed cars or done different things in your town and village for different people. And for me, that was around 11 years old. I worked in my local pub, bottling up on a Saturday and Sunday morning. And I then moved from there when I was about 12, 13 to the local town, and I washed cars on a Saturday and Sunday morning for a business. They had two cars, one was a hearse and one was a limousine, and I got £10 per car. I thought I'd made it. So what then happened through that period of a number of years, got to know the owner and started to sort of work a bit more for them over a period of time when I was older. And I actually, long story cut short, but I actually left university early to go and work for them full time to be a trainee funeral director.
Yeah.
And I realised quite quickly it was a small family business. My name wasn't above the door. There was people that had been there 20 years before me that, I wasn't going to leapfrog. So I thought, this isn't really for me. I had bigger aspirations as a young man and wanted to conquer the world. So I left there. I went to London and worked for HSBC for a year, and then Connex South Eastern, which was a train company then, for another year. And my brother and I got two wonderful brothers, 10 and 12 years older than me. My eldest brother contacted me to say, I'm thinking of starting up a business on the side to what he was doing in manufacturing. Would I be interested in joining him? So we worked out the details, and I left the London life and came back down to Kent and started in a manufacturing business there, which we'll get back onto later. Anyway, fast forward another 15, 20 years, and we'd sold those businesses, and I stayed on as MD, but a little bit bored. I turned 40, hit a midlife crisis, didn't want to buy a fast car or do anything stupid. So I thought, what do I want to do? I don't want to start another business, because starting businesses are really hard. And I know that because I've started businesses and subsequently again started another two businesses. But I stumbled across acquisitions and didn't know much about it. So started reading up, listening to different podcasts like this, and going to different events and learning more about it. Didn't quite know what business to buy or what sector to buy in. And the phrase kept coming back to me that there's two certainties in life, which is death and taxes. I didn't know much about taxes apart from paying a load.
And it's getting worse.
It is, certainly is. Thank you, Rachel. But I did know about the funeral industry and that sort of side of it. So October 2019, I went back to the funeral directors where I'd worked as a boy, washing the cars at the weekend, saw the owner, had a coffee and a catch up with him, and said to him, whenever you're ready, would you give me first refusal to buy your business? He was 62 at the time, didn't have a succession plan in place. He turned around right there and then and said, I think I'm ready now. So that was quite a shock to me. I didn't think he'd be ready there and then. A few months later, the 6th of March 2020, we signed on the dotted line, share purchase agreement, acquired 100% of the ownership of the business. 10 days later, Boris Johnson, the Prime Minister at the time, said anyone that can work from home, go and work from home because we're going into lockdown.
Great.
So interesting timing. I was still managing director of the manufacturing company that we'd sold and stayed on at as well. So I had over 100 people that we were looking after there, and then this new acquisition that we'd bought as well. And we didn't furlough anybody and didn't let anybody go. We kept everything going on both sites, which was very interesting. So that's how I got into it, from washing the cars on the weekend as a young lad to then owning the company, 30 years later.
It's a really interesting one that you kind of started there. So coincidentally, there's a post going out tomorrow about what kids' first jobs are going to be these days. 20 years ago, it was a paper round. You'd go and you'd walk into the newsagent, you get 50 papers, you go and deliver them and get £3 or £4. It just doesn't happen anymore. And I can't work out what that next thing is. If you were 13, 14 now, what would you do to try and get that first little bit of income in your pocket? Have you got any kind of suggestions?
It's a really good point, because it's very hard now. A friend of mine, Andrew, my school childhood friend, he was an executive news distributor, paperboy, but it's hard to get a job now. I've got 2 young kids, and without a national insurance number when you get when you're 16, it's really hard to go into anywhere. So hospitality, I've worked in bars and pubs and clubs and restaurants and all those sorts of things over the years, from 14, 15 and onwards. What would I do now? I think I would go back to either trying to work with somebody, friend of a friend or friend of the family, and trying to do something a little bit under the radar maybe, or, going around with my bucket and sponge and saying, can I wash your car, please? Yeah. Because it's very difficult to do it. The only plus side to a young person and a young entrepreneur is their youth. They have if I go to knock on somebody's door and say, can I wash your car? It's not going to be the same as the neighbour's son 2 doors down, who's 13 or whatever, going and asking.
Yeah, I mean, I genuinely think if the kids today reached out to business owners and entrepreneurs and just said, instead of just whacking CVs out, I've applied for 100 jobs today, didn't get an interview. Well, yeah, because you didn't really think about it. If you turned up, looked presentable and just asked for an opportunity, I actually think quite a lot of business owners will give people a chance these days. It's that hard to do, and I appreciate employment's difficult, and especially if you're young, it's not that simple. But washing cars and everything it's hard, isn't it? And just having people out there that'll put some effort in actually is one of the biggest things at the moment. Like, finding people that want to work is quite hard. So just getting out there and knocking on a door may be a better way of getting in. You touched on COVID. How did you find the new acquisition integrating you into it at the same time as trying to look after 100 staff? Was balancing the 2 completely different types of business quite hard work when you go from manufacturing brain to funeral brain back to manufacturing? How'd you balance that?
For me, it's always about people. So it doesn't matter whether it's manufacturing or service-based. It doesn't matter whether it's in the UK or in America or China or Australia. It all comes down to people at the end of the day. So my role as the business owner and the leader, and I'm very passionate about leadership rather than management, is to ensure that the team are looked after. They have the things that they need to be able to perform at their best and to be able to provide the best service to their clients and families and customers, whether that's manufacturing on a production line or looking after a family that's just lost their loved one. So for me, it wasn't too much of a change. The biggest difference for all of us at that time, and it's only been a few years really, but it's quite hard sometimes to think back as to what it was like. But for all of us, it was the uncertainty. We didn't know what was going to happen. We didn't know if there was any way to protect ourselves, whether this was going to be it forever, whether it was going to get even worse. So for all of us, we had to deal with that, which was brand new to any business owner. Yeah. Last pandemic was 1918, the Spanish flu, which we now call the flu, and we hadn't had anything since 100 years.
I guess manufacturing, you can't even work from home. It's physical, on-site kind of work.
Yeah, so we had 2, I remember it, very clearly actually, on that 16th, was it 16th of March, where he said anyone that can work from home. We had the IT guys in the canteen with all the office team going in, checking their computer was going to work remotely, packing up their cars with their desktops, and everything else, because it wasn't laptops, and taking their monitors and taking their keyboards and mouse and everything, going one at a time in and going home. And then typically I was the only one going. We had 2 sites actually, going into both sites to check on the team. Whilst then, I remember this, going round at Easter, because it was March, so Easter had followed just after that, with Easter eggs for the remote workers, knocking on the door, putting the Easter egg down, stepping 2 meters back, and then having a conversation with them. And for a lot of them, that'd been the first time they'd seen someone outside their immediate circle. So all of those things, we just did them. And I think that's an entrepreneurial trait anyway, is we just, whatever the problems are, whether it's Brexit or whether it's a recession or whether it's, the new taxes and this and that, we just deal with them. Tell us what the rules are, we'll play by the rules, and we'll get on with it.
I don't know if they locked the country down again, if we would. I think a lot of people would be like,
yeah,
are you sure we're doing this time? Like, I just look at where we are as an economy, where we are with the government at the moment, and just think, like, we all did it. And it helped in March. The weather was great. Like, I remember that first week of lockdown, going home and building like a big new play thing for the kids. It took me 3 days to build it, and it was huge, and the kids loved it. But the weather, I just remember the weather that week being beautiful, and I wonder if, like, the weather was awful and stuff, whether everyone would have been like, I don't really want a week off this week, thanks. I don't know if people would comply as much. Having been through 3 lockdowns, I think we'd be a bit more like, is this worth it? I don't know.
I think we've now got hindsight, which is not just the UK, but the rest of the world. And there were some countries that didn't lock down and actually have come out with a better economy than what we have. And I think you're right. It was very interesting how we all adapted the masks and how we would put masks on and get used to it. And, it would be weird if somebody didn't have a mask. If I came in now today to record this with a mask on, it would be weird.
It would be a bit.
And like I said, it was only a few years ago that it was the other way round.
Yeah.
We got very used very quickly to putting masks on and distancing ourselves, and then we got very used to doing this and being back in
doing it again. Yeah.
So, but I think you're right. I think it's too close to what happened for it to everyone to conform to restrictions and everything else.
That work from home, like going around and delivering eggs and stuff. I remember lockdown 2, where we'd refurbished the office kind of during lockdown 1 because no one was in. So all of a sudden there was loads of builders without work, and I thought, well, let's gut the place and redo it. And then so everyone had kind of come back and everyone enjoyed the new working environment. And all of a sudden when lockdown 2 came in, it was like, I don't want to work from home. I don't want to be on my own anymore. How did you manage supporting those kind of individuals that were on their own? Obviously that Easter egg thing is a really nice value add, but obviously I feel like working from home is quite a hard thing to do, especially long term. That hybrid, I think, is where the world's going to end up and where it seems to have gone to. We've gone from one extreme and we're now moving back. I was on the tube yesterday and it was rammed at 8 o'clock in the morning. So people are obviously back in the office. How have you found work from home in that sort of environment? Did you find it easy or did people struggle?
Yeah, a lot of people struggled. It isn't for everybody. And I think this is the problem with a blanket rule, is some people will thrive and do really well under that working from home, full time even. And then a lot of people will absolutely hate it. For me, it's even bigger than that. I think that there's a loneliness pandemic out there that we don't talk about. And, one of the biggest causes of death, or the biggest cause of death in young men, is suicide. And now women are actually getting close to that as well. And then the older generation as well, we see that. We do coffee mornings each month at each of the locations of the different funeral homes, and we see how much they look forward to that time of interacting with people. And COVID really put a barrier in between. Don't communicate, don't see other people. Yeah. So I think the hybrid is a good compromise, but for me, it's all of the lessons, or a lot of the lessons I learned, was observational. So it was listening to that sales call that someone else made. It was listening to how that reception person dealt with that awkward person that walked in, or it was the conversations around the water cooler and around the coffee machine. You don't get those if you're just working from home. So I think the younger generation coming through have got a huge gap in their personality building and their knowledge building about how to interact and, speak and communicate with other people. Yeah. We don't find that difficult because we just knew all of that.
Is that why you've gone into coaching? Is that one of the kind of drivers that you're trying to help the younger generation, or is it more of a mentor position?
It's a bit of both. So I think in every call that I do, or every interaction I have with mentoring and coaching, and I say this to my clients at the beginning, is it will be a mentoring coaching relationship, and I break them down into, if I slip into coaching, it's because I know you know the answer. I'm just trying to draw it out of you, because if you confirm it yourself, then that will really cement it for you. But if I know you don't know the answer, because you've never done it before, then I'm going to help give you the answer or a few options, and then that will teach you. Yeah. So it's that kind of a hybrid of those two things. I think communication is just so vitally important now in any relationship in life, whether that's personal relationship, husband and wife, or whatever, through to especially in the workplace. And I've seen it so many times break down in all of those different types of relationships, to them being what was very nice to then never speaking again. And communication has become very easy and slack in terms of just texting a message quickly, not even rereading it, not even, making sure you've got all the right points in the right places. And that is really unhelpful and unhealthy for relationships.
I feel like there's a massive movement away from conversation. Like, it's just, you can send a text, you can send an email. Like, we've had campaigns in work where it's like, pick up the phone.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you're not allowed to send an email to the customer to update them. You have to pick the phone up. And people are like, why are you doing that? And I just feel like the conversation flows better, like, and you build that relationship with customers or whoever more. Yeah. And there's such a drive to go, oh, well, I've sent them a text. Mm-hmm. No, pick up the phone. No, I've emailed them as well. No, pick up the phone. Oh, well, I've chased them. No, pick up the phone and speak to them, because they'll answer the phone. Mm-hmm. And I don't know if that's a generational thing or what.
Yeah, it massively is. And the problem is the younger generation were the first generation. We weren't even that first generation. It was our children that were the first generation born into the smartphone world, and the tablet world. So that's how they've been taught to communicate. On top of that, they were told not to communicate with their friends or even family outside of their bubble. So they were forced to. Then they saw mum and dad sitting on the sofa at home on 70% furlough, watching Netflix and chilling, didn't have to communicate with anybody. So all of those things combined means they don't want to speak to anybody. I'll make a prediction for you that in the not too distant future, there will be smartphones where it will be an option to have a way of communicating via voice. Because why do you have a phone? And again, when we pick up the phone, for us, it's this, because it was a telephone that had a wire on it that went into the wall. Yeah. I've still got a home phone, partly because of my job. Most people think that's funny. I give them a home phone number. So why have we got this way of communicating on the smartphones when at least probably 80% of people don't do it?
Well, they don't. I mean, you look at, if I asked you what your parents' mobile landline phone number was 50 years ago, right. I bet you already know what it is.
100%.
But these days, if I say what's your partner's phone number, you go, I don't know, because it's in your phone as wife or girlfriend or whatever, and you never dial the number.
So true.
And it's such a transition of, we've gone from this identifiable number for everyone. Like, weirdly, I could probably still tell you the phone numbers of some of the school friends, because you used to dial it to speak to them. And whereas now you're just like, I'll message such and such, and we've moved away from that kind of connection completely. And I own a telecoms company.
That's right, exactly. Yeah, I hadn't thought of it until you mentioned it, but I even remember the number of the phone box that some of the friends would hang around, and you'd phone the phone box.
Wow!
And now they're defibrillations or they're libraries or whatever they are.
Crazy, isn't it?
Yeah.
So you've grown and sold businesses in the UK. How did that exit come about? Why did you exit at that point? Kind of, was it just the right time? Was it money? Was it situation? What was the driver for thinking now is the right time?
Yeah, no, it's a really good question. We were a very fast-growing business. So the business that I set up with my brother, or we set up together, it was a manufacturing business. We were manufacturing plastic parts for industry mainly, and typically in high volumes. So he was working for a company that did that and made parts, part of a worldwide organisation with their headquarters in America in St. Louis, Missouri. And he saw a gap in the market for low to medium volumes. People would phone him. He was a salesperson at the time. Can I just buy 100? I don't want to buy 1,000. I just need 100. You can charge me for 1,000. Throw the 900 away, but I just want 100. And he went to the company and said, can we start doing this? They said, no, we're high volume manufacturers. That's what we want to do. So he went back to him and said, could he set a company up on the side, supply the 1,000 to them, and then at least they're getting the business still, and then that company would supply the 100 to the end client. And they agreed to it, which was fantastic. So he stayed on. I left my job in London and came down. My first day was on my sister-in-law's dressing table. I had a laptop and a fax machine, because that's how long ago it was. And I was phoning people on the telephone, because you couldn't text then. I don't think maybe just page people sometimes, but I would phone people because that's how you did business then. And we started to build that business up. We moved from my sister-in-law's dressing table into a farm building. It was a corrugated Nissan hut style farm building, no running water inside unless it rained, and it would come straight through the middle. And we very quickly upgraded the office that was there, the kind of the shack, to a garden shed. We bought a brand new garden shed. We lined it, carpeted it, painted it, insulated it, had 2 desks in there, filing cabinet, 2 phones, computers, and away we went. We were phoning people almost from around the world from there. They weren't knowing we were sat inside this Nissan hut, freezing cold.
Doesn't matter, does
in
it?
a garden shed. So it was fantastic. They're the good old days. So we grew that business, and then we moved from that building to another farm building, but that was nicer. It did have running water inside. We then were starting to get inquiries from America. And we were, okay, this is interesting. And I think, looking back, I think it was because of the metric system. So Americans, it's imperial, inches and feet and yards, whereas we're more a bit of both. Actually, we're a hybrid here, but we operate in millimetres. And with the European market going over to America, people were looking for metric size items. We were one of the first because we were small and nimble. We set up a website, and one of the first to set up e-commerce back in the day. And people would find us over the web. So we would send samples to these different clients and actually had quite a good ratio of closing those, into orders. My wife's aunt was English, married an American, and they just relocated from Arkansas to St. Louis, ironically. So we set up a business in their spare room. I went over 31st of October 2009, Halloween, my first time in America ever. Walking through the airports with everyone dressed up was quite an experience. And we grew that from her spare room to a unit with offices and warehousing, and took on more people. And it was in the backyard of this big headquarters for the company that my brother used to work for. And we were on their radar, and we then started buying from them, and we would have meetings with them. And they were like, how can you set up in our backyard, as they would say, and do business? How's that possible? So that they and others actually approach us, and we said, look, we're not ready to sell. You can't afford us, is what we actually said. And they said, how much? So we came up with a silly number, and they said, okay.
Shit.
So that is kind of how it happened in reality. We weren't looking to sell. We actually had it was quite interesting. We put together a 5-year growth plan for our business before we were acquired. And we spent time with the senior leadership team that we'd formed, fantastic team, sales leader and accounts leader and customer service leader and so on and so forth. And we'd drawn up this plan for what we wanted to achieve over the next 5 years. And by the acquisition, or by being acquired, it meant that all of those things could happen overnight.
Yeah.
And it would give the team both in the US and in the UK more support. It meant that we weren't responsible for payroll for everybody and all the other things that go with running businesses. It looks glamorous when it all goes well, but when it doesn't, it can be quite scary.
Yeah.
And you're a lot of responsibility on the director's shoulders. You've always got that fear that you're going to prison if something goes wrong. So we had a chat about it. My brother was 52 by the time he actually we exited, and I was 40, because 12 years younger. And he was the majority shareholder, so it was his decision mainly. But we spoke about it, and we're great friends to this day still. And he decided it was the right time. So we exited. A big part of us was that every team member across both sides of the pond kept their job, which they did if they wanted to, and we could stay on to help with the the processes. And it was an interesting time. So that's how it came about.
Did you say that it was your brother's old company then that bought the company? Yeah. I see this all the time. Yep. How people will stretch out, go and do something else, and then it kind of is like big corporates aren't flexible enough, and they have to let people go. And then when they get to a size, it's what they actually wanted to do. They just can't do it themselves because they haven't got the budgets and stuff. I just think it's interesting that they effectively have gone all the way around the houses, let you build, and then just absorbed it back in anyway.
But what's even interesting, further to that, is after a few years of acquiring what they think they want, they realise it doesn't fit their model as well.
Oh,
So
right, okay.
they start to reduce the small, medium quantities, they start to get rid of some of the clients that they don't want, and so on and so forth, and end up with where they were, a few years later after, buying us out and spending a load of money and time and everything else. So
Yeah.
it's a different mindset. It's the old analogy of a big oil tanker ship and a speedboat, and you can't be captain of both. You're either captain of the oil ship or you're the captain of the speedboat and having fun and doing circles here, or you spend a half a mile.
It's two different journeys, isn't it?
Yeah.
Like running a business on mass scale and manufacturing on mass scale is one thing. Doing it quite niche, I suppose, and doing small runs is a completely different market, different profit levels, different pricing structures. And I suppose if you're big and corporate, getting out of bed for a small order isn't really worth the effort.
No.
It's just strange that they knew that at the start and said, no, we don't want to do it. Went round the houses, then come back and go, actually, we do want it.
Yeah.
And then, of course, they've ended up back where they started anyway.
Yeah, I think it was a hindsight thing. I think they wanted people, they wanted us and our team, which is what they got. And I think the idea was good, but I think the reality in hindsight again was they couldn't really cope with both. I think one way it can work is you buy it and you keep it as a separate division. Use all the benefits of the big manufacturing side, but you keep it run separately because it's, like I say, it's a different mindset.
Yeah. You've mentioned a couple of really key dates. Is that I if I look back, I couldn't tell you the dates of stuff. I can tell you roughly, this happened on there and this happened there, but it feels like you just know when stuff happens in your life and you've got those key dates edged in. Is that just the way your brain works, or is that something you've developed over time?
A little bit, yeah. I don't know them for everything, but I think there was some, worldwide dates that people remember. People remember where they're at when they heard that message from Boris Johnson on the 16th of March, and it's those are big ones there. The 2009 31st of October, I remember, because my youngest child was born on the 4th of July that year. So July, August, September, October, three and a bit months later, I'm then flying over to America for the first time trying to set up this office. So there's reasons why I can link those dates there. And looking back, it's like, what were we doing? It was crazy. My wife was left here with a 2-year-old and a 3-month-old, and I'm,
in the doghouse abroad.
Oh, yeah. Doghouse either side. But
that's a good place to be.
That's right, yeah.
How did that exit process go? Was it easy? Did you have issues in it? Did it nearly fall over, or was it really smooth sailing?
No, as with most deals, we're on the other side of that now as well, but it took a long time. We didn't know what we didn't know, but the Americans just took a long time. Okay, big company, big corporate mentality. Ironically, I think the money was the easiest part of it for them. It was just all the other things that they had to align. Buying two companies, one in the US and one in the UK simultaneously, and different things like that. There was lots of due diligence and legals and everything else. So within any deal, I always say there's an 11th hour wobble from one side, if not both, and you have to be prepared for that. Often as the acquirer, you're excited to buy the new business, so you're helping the seller in that 11th hour wobble, and I've had it, in every deal I've done since. And we probably had that with them. I remember conversations where, do we really want to do this? If it's going to take another X amount of months, do we just pull the plug? But by then you're kind of committed.
Yeah, you've spent the money.
You've spent the money in your head. Yeah, absolutely. And you've started to think of that new life and how it's going to be easier and better. So it wasn't without its issues, but it was our first time. So we didn't actually have, and this is quite interesting really, we didn't have anybody help coach mentor us through it, which probably in hindsight we should have done. Didn't even think of it even just till now. So that would have been helpful. And then also I think what happened post acquisition wasn't how it was sold to us. So we were sold that the MD of the company in the UK, of the overall big company that was acquiring us, was going to be MD. My brother was going to be commercial director, and I can't even remember what my title was going to be, but it was something else. Whereas before, my brother was MD and I was sort of general manager and looking after everything else. I really liked that part of looking after the teams and the people and the overall being involved with the business, and that was a step back too far for me. The managing director said, don't worry, we'll get everyone involved. There's a decision to be made. And we said, what happens if there's a decision where we disagree? And he said, well, we'll go with your decision. And that didn't happen. So that was frustrating. So it was very interesting actually. It was only a few months after the deal went through. one of the things we wanted to do was have the holiday of a lifetime. You know, we'd have more money than we'd ever had, and we wanted to take mum and dad to Disney with our youngest, our two young children, perfect age, you know, still believed in all the magic of everything. It was, I say, no expense spared, Disney through and through. I remember being so unhappy there, in the happiest place in the world, because we'd sold our baby. And then we weren't being able to run it how we had been led to, you know, thought we were.
Yeah.
So the old adage of, you know, money doesn't buy you love or happiness is very true, and easy to say when you've got money, but it's true. And I just want to get that message across, that you can be happy without any money, and you can be really unhappy with all the money in the world. So that's a decision you can make. Money is a factor of it to a degree, but it isn't the be all and end all. So it was a very difficult time. I call it golden handcuffs, because we're sat there, you know, we weren't contracted to stay, but there was an earn out part of it. If we did well, we'd got a bit more. But it was more of a duty to stay for the rest of the team.
Yeah.
So
you felt like you had to stay for the staff and everyone.
But I didn't want to either. It was horrible.
Do you think, did your brother have that same kind of struggle?
I think so. But we didn't talk about it as much then, you know, and again, for the first time ever, it put pressure on our relationship, and kind of, I think he felt a bit guilty for having, you know, pushed it through, and I've, you know, felt guilty for putting pressure on him, and we, you know, we eventually spoke about it, and I say we're great now, but it was difficult because that's what we kind of lost, and ultimately what happened was the MD of the UK division that we were acquired by left. Paul became MD, my brother, for a few years, and then he left, and then I became MD. And then it got back to when he and I were back in charge of the UK. It was brilliant. The second worst day was when he left. I'd been waiting nearly 20 years as a succession plan to become MD of a big company. Got my dream, but my brother wasn't there.
You lost your right hand man, effectively.
It was horrible. So I then spent another few months, you know, it was like a grief.
You felt lost.
Yeah, because we would just bounce off each other, and we're very different personalities, you know. So I was driving and go-getting, and he was slightly cautious, and the money and the finances together worked really well. So I pushed him out of his comfort zone, but he brought me back into reality as well. And that's why we did so well in business. But when one of us left, and when he left, it was very difficult. But you've still got to run the business. You've still got to put the face on.
You've still got to turn up every day. You've still got to motivate the team.
That's right.
I always say, like, business ownership is quite a lonely place. Mm-hmm. Like, you can't moan down the chain because it's demotivating. No. And so it's really interesting that you kind of struggled in that transition, because it's kind of similar. Like, where'd you go? Especially in a big corporate. Yeah, you don't really have that route. I think a lot of business owners struggle when they sell about what's next, because you're right, they've spent the money, they have this big idea of, I'm going to do X, Y, and Z, and maybe it doesn't always work out that way, because they've lost their reason for getting up every day. Mm-hmm. You kind of didn't have that, because you went straight from MD manufacturing to funeral director. Mm-hmm. Was that your exit strategy? Were you did you know that your time was coming up, or was it just that he was like, right, well, I'm ready to sell now, and you were like, well, I'm going to have to buy it now, and I'll work out how I'm going to do the two later?
No, I wanted to do an acquisition. I didn't know it'd be that one to start with. I was hopeful it was, you know, and I guess putting it out into the universe as a good thing, and that it all aligned. But I made that decision. Do I want to do another 20, 25 years, get a great pension and a gold watch, but be bored? You know, we'd set the team up so well that they were running it. You know, the different heads of departments were fantastic. And I was just walking around sort of, you know, just checking everything was okay, but ultimately bored. Yeah. And because it then wasn't our company, the drive wasn't to then, you know, open up another site in the UK or in Europe or whatever, which we would have done if it wasn't, you know, sold. The Americans weren't interested in that.
It was safety than more of the same instead of growth.
And I didn't want that. A bit like probably, you know, in the 20 years before, where I left London, you know, in a nice cushy job to go and work on my sister-in-law's dressing table. I wanted that challenge. And I think as entrepreneurs, especially young entrepreneurs, we're looking for something. And you're right, when people exit a business, they must have something they're going to go on to do. There's only so much golf you can play or so much time you can spend with the grandkids or whatever else. And you've got to have something that's a pull to take you away from your business and the hassle of it, which you call hassle at the time, but you'll look back on fondly as the good old days.
Those things you hate right now are the things that kind of keep you busy and your brain ticking over at the same time. So you've acquired the first funeral home, and then kind of what did that process from day one look like? People talk about the 100 days.
Yeah.
Like what did those 100 days look like? Was it a learning curve? I mean, you already knew certain things, I guess. So did you just kind of think, I'm just going to keep it the same, or was there stuff you had to change?
No, it was really interesting. I really love the first 100 days after acquisition. You know, for me, that's the real time of being able to do certain things with the new team. Often, if not in most or nearly all cases, the team that has been acquired doesn't know they were being sold. So you then go in as this new person that they may or may never have met before or know about. You didn't recruit them, you didn't train them, you didn't develop them, yet you're now their boss and their owner in their eyes. I don't like the word boss, but that's how they see you. So it's about calming the situation down. The problem with most acquisitions is most people, their only understanding of acquisition is from the movie Pretty Woman, where Richard Gere says, I buy big companies and I break them up and sell them off for parts.
Yeah.
And that's what they think is going to happen to them. Or they've heard somebody else that a business got acquired and then they shut their department down, they lost their job. So you're there to steady the ship, if that's what you want to do, which is what I was, to be able to say, look, your job's to say, I need you. I'm not coming in to replace you, and there's no other, plan here. So we need you to be able to, make sure that this moves forward. So the first one's always hard. The second one becomes easier. I'll get onto that in a minute. But what I did previously, actually, with the manufacturing business, when we knew we were going to be taking over and be in charge, we put a plan together. I called it A New Hope from Star Wars. And it was what we were going to do with each department, how we were going to make sure it all worked, and then a 100-day plan, really, of how we monitored and checked everything was working well and where we needed to adjust things. So with an acquisition, you're going to buy the business. You hope to. You don't know the exact date. It's a bit like giving birth. You get a date, it's a predicted date, but it's plus or minus a bit. And I always say to people acquiring, aim for this date for everyone. The realistic thing is going to be at least 2 weeks later, unless you're doing something distressed and quick like you do. But but if in a normal share purchase agreement, that type of thing, it's typically not always the date you aim for. So what I did is I put a plan in place, and I've still got it, and I teach people this, the first 100 days in business. There's certain things that you need to do on day one, and certain things you need to get ownership of: the bank account, the passcodes, the keys, the alarm fobs, the different things that you need to be able to gain access to your buildings. You need to meet with the team. You need to be able to ensure that they are hearing the message from you rather than from the person exiting, because you're two very different mindsets.
Yeah.
I remember, in the second acquisition, I think it was waiting in the car park round the corner, waiting for the phone call from the solicitors to say, yep, you can go in now. It's a bit like getting keys for a house. And I was literally waiting there, and I was like, come on, because I'm like running out of time here and I've got stuff to do. So I really enjoy that part. What I also do, and started on the first one, was I sit down with each person and have like a one-to-one with them. And at that time, I also say, look, it's not my name above the door. It's not yours. So we're in this together. You know more than I do about the business and the clients and how it runs. What ideas, and suggestions have you got for the business? And I asked them my 3 what questions. So I say to them individually, in a room away from anybody else overhearing, if this was your business and I want you to start thinking like it's your business, what would you stop doing? If this was your business, what would you start doing? And if money was no object, what would you want to do with this business? And we get a list of their ideas and suggestions. And I did that with each. There's only 4 team members at the first acquisition. It was the owner who left, and then there was 4 other team members there. And I asked all of them that, and then we created a simple list on OneDrive, an Excel list, and put the dates in, what they were, and then actually, can you do that? I'll find out about that. Let's get a quote for this. And after 100 days, I think it was 90 actually, but after the first 3 months, I went back into a morning huddle, and I said to the guys, how many ideas and suggestions do you think we've done? They all knew they were doing. I didn't know everyone's combined. I'd totaled them all up. A bit of a geek like that. So I said, how many do you think we've done all together in the first 90 days? And they said, I don't know, 10, 15, 20. I said, we've done 102. And you try doing 102 changes in any business in 90 days is impossible.
Yeah.
It was their ideas, their suggestions. There'd been 40 ideas where they hadn't been able to do things in the past. And I'm coming in saying, yeah, that's a good idea. Why haven't you done that before? We weren't allowed to. So some were free and easy, some were expensive, like new vehicles, and everything in between. But they then felt part of this,
Growth journey.
That's right, and they were part of it. And subsequently, I still do that now with all the teams, and still ask for ideas and suggestions on a regular basis.
They are three really simple questions that you don't have to do in the first 100 days. Like you could literally go into any business tomorrow, even if you own it, and just ask them. And it's something we try to do, is trying to get the team together and do those kind of brainstorming type ideas, and then we'll go away and as a management team look at what's been suggested. And some of them are wild and you just think, well, we just can't do that. But
the hot tub in the corner of the office.
Well, we'd all have one of them. But equally, people are in the trenches. They're the ones that are going to know what works or kind of what doesn't work. If you're not there knowing that the vehicles are breaking down, how do you know you need to buy a new one? So it kind of makes sense, I guess. If you're a small business, you've got that flexibility. Whereas if you're corporate, it just
if you're corporate, you have to do it at team level. So, with your team, what are their ideas and suggestions for your team? You can think outside your team, which is great, but it's harder for you to have any say over that.
Yeah.
But you can control stuff within your team. And the top tip, if you are going to do that, today or tomorrow after you're listening to this podcast, is whenever you implement one of their ideas, first and foremost, it's their idea. Out of those 102, there was lots of ideas I had. I didn't take any credit for it. I don't need any credit for it. It's not about that. So never take credit for it. Always praise the person whose idea it was. And secondly, and this is the crazy one, tell them that you've done it. Even if it's we want new pens with our company name on it and they are using it, you need to tell them, by the way, we did that idea and suggestion. We've all now got new company pens. Because it cements something in their brain that thinks, okay, now I've done that one, I'll come up with another one.
Yeah.
And I say once a quarter we have at different locations, we'll have an ideas and suggestions meeting and people will know it's coming up, so it gives them time to think about it. We report back on all the things we did last time and then all the things that they come up with for the future as well. Some have been on the list for 3 years because we can't afford it just yet. Others have been done and dusted within a week because I didn't know about it.
Yeah.
So it's a great way of getting people to open up more.
That feedback loop, I suppose.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So thinking about the acquisitions you've done, is there any big clangers? Like what's gone wrong?
Yeah, well, yes. None that have caused the business to go under, but there's been some huge learning curves along the way, and I'm always a great one in mistakes or issues are a great opportunity to learn from rather than your successes. You don't really learn a lot from those. It can feel nice for a bit, but actually it doesn't really require much grey matter. So trusting certain people over the years, over trusting people has been a big mistake. Not documenting something that you didn't think you needed to document because you were a friend and it was fine and it was a handshake or it was just an agreement. Document everything.
Yeah.
To follow it all up in writing, because that's ultimately what it will come back for. Worry, lots of times of worry and sleepless nights over different things, mainly cash flow rather than people. For me, I'm okay with the people side, but cash flow or issues or whatever else it might be. And the reality is you somehow get through the months and then those turn into quarters and those turn into years. And I don't quite know how it all works sometimes for small businesses, but it does work. And the other thing for me is about not going from one to the other just because. And it's very addictive. Acquiring businesses is very, for people that like doing it, it's a lot of fun. I always challenge people on why are you doing it? What's the motivation behind it? If it's just for more money, it doesn't align with me personally. So I've personally stopped acquiring businesses. I had 7 on the go about 2 years ago. I did one of those because that was quite a long way through. There was a couple that were heads of terms that I actually said, I'm really sorry, I'm going to stop. And I felt good after it. I felt like a weight lifted off my shoulder. So the way I do acquisitions is an initial consideration on day one, a lump sum of money on day one for the owner, and then a deferred element over a 5-year period in my case. And all I was doing was laying more tunnel and more track, and the light at the end of the tunnel that was getting brighter then got smaller and further away.
Because you had more payments to make.
Right. Yeah, whereas actually I was thinking, we're only going to got a few more payments and then these are paid off. So why are you doing it? It comes back to that Simon Sinek, start with why, but what's your why and when is enough for you? what's your numbers, or what's your metrics as to know what that, that's enough.
Yeah. Do you, obviously, like the history of the businesses that you've got now extend back to 250 years. Do you feel like an honor to own that, but also like a pressure to keep that going? Like, what's the legacy look like on that?
Yeah, it is an honour, without a doubt, but there is pressure there, and for those businesses, it's really about serving your community. It's not about the shareholder price on some spreadsheet somewhere. It's about, we're looking after real families who have lost their most precious person and their loved one and are grieving. And the phrase I use is that we're there for them in their hour of need. And that's a real privilege. And, so the legacy is, and again, because I see it every day, I'm reminded how short life truly is.
Yeah.
And not many people are. So we always think we're going to live forever, and I'm reminded we're not. So that's one of the plus sides of owning several funeral homes, is that reminder to be able to live life and do things you want to sooner rather than waiting, because sometimes that you wait too long and it doesn't happen. So there's a privilege there. The legacy really is more about, what did I do with it for my time? We're always going to exit a business. That's either through death, that's either through selling it like we've done in the past, or it's passing it on to somebody else. But we're going to exit that business at some point. I don't know when that is for me personally yet, but I know it's going to happen, because that's one of the other truths in life.
Yeah.
So I want to leave it better than when I found it, and I want to set it up for success. I want to set it up so that the next person, whether that's family or the team or somebody else, takes over, it was better than when I found it. And that's kind of the legacy part really for me, because in 250 years' time, no one's going to remember that I even had a go at it.
Had a go at it, yeah.
So, but for right now, am I making my children proud? Am I making my parents proud, and my partner, and all those sorts of things? That's more, what I'm about now, because you can't please everybody.
No, from a cash, you mentioned cash flow before, and I suppose you're in a world where you don't get repeat customers. I suppose you do from the family perspective. Yeah. How are you finding new customers? How do you manage that cash flow, and do they pay over time, or do their family just come in and pay? Like, it's an interesting sale, isn't it, really? Because it's kind of at the worst possible time for the family. Yeah. Like, how do you manage that emotion?
It's actually part of the process and the grieving process to a degree, and a little bit sexist, but often find the male side of the family are the ones wanting to sort that out. There's not a lot we can do, as family members. We're in the arrangement office, and we can, put together the best service and the best, music and visual tribute and everything else. But it's just another thing that actually it helps, because in that moment most people are lost. And if you're giving them something to do and paying for the service is part of that, it's helpful. They've got something they can latch on to.
It's like closure, I suppose.
Yeah.
It's just
and so there's different ways of how people pay, and there's also prepaid funeral plans which people can arrange and prepay for their funeral before they pass away, which I recommend to everybody. And not for the financial side, that helps, but actually the planning of it. And just written a book, I was saying to you before we started here, where the basis of the book is off most families that come to us don't know what their loved one wanted for their service. So the first question is burial or cremation, and they don't even know the answer to that. So the book is around the different stages of the funeral arrangement and what would you decide for you, and have that conversation with your next of kin and your others now.
Yeah.
Because it's better to do that now. I think when everyone turns 50-ish, typically if you've got kids, they're mature. On the morning, you should have the conversation about what you want for your funeral, because hopefully it's a long way away, and then you go out and celebrate for the day. So you've done it, but it's not on, because
it's one of those conversations no one wants to have, is it?
No, but it also becomes too late to have.
Yeah.
If you're in the 80s, 90s, 100s, so you want me to go now, do you? So you can't have it too late. You can't have it when you're 20, because you're going to live forever. Yeah. So I picked 50 as a halfway point, because you're mature enough. Your children are probably mature enough. You can have this, and this book will help guide you through it. It's called If I Died Again, and it's about a friendly ghost in the corner of the arranging room looking down on his wife and 2 children as to, why didn't we just have this conversation? I could have what you're doing is exactly what I wanted, but you're struggling, thinking, I don't know if this is what Dad wanted or not.
Yeah.
And it's just a way of, and I've got a little tick thing at the end of it where you can tick yes, and put in what you want, because that's as simple as it needs to be. And there's two certainties in life. We are going to need that at some point. And we see, and it's happening even more now, the grief families are going through and the disruptions of broken families. It's absolutely horrible. Some, not very many, fortunately, but some of them are horrible as to, picking sides, and we want this and we don't want that. And I fear that's only going to get worse. So by you setting out what you want saves a lot of that heartache for everyone.
Do you want to know what I want?
Yes, please.
So, when you go into a graveyard,
Yep.
and there's that massive one in the corner.
Old Del Boy one.
Yeah, that huge one in the corner.
With a fountain.
And everyone's like,
who's that?
Who's that prick in the corner?
That's you.
Well, I feel like people do that when I'm just in a room, genuinely.
Yeah.
So I'd quite like someone to walk into a graveyard, I'm like, who the hell is that? And then walk up, it'd be a massive pyramid. Like these days, you probably wouldn't even get planning permission for it. But I just like the idea of being like buried in a pyramid, like being pushed in, and then them like sealing the door behind me. Like
Tutankhamun.
Yeah, Tutankhamun style.
And then a big light coming out the top.
Yeah.
Like in Las Vegas.
As I said, I think you'd have to go through planning these days, and councils would
have to be a
refuse
cemetery,
it.
not a churchyard, because they won't accept that. So
But
cemeteries might.
I just think these days they're all quite small. There's probably a cost thing to that, but I just think like you go into some of the really old ones and they're all massive, kind of like big, like just big buildings, and I just kind of
perfect
big pyramid in the corner of a graveyard would do me fine.
Sounds good.
Like and then you'd have all those like in 100 years' time, they'd be like, oh, he's not in a box. He's sat at a table playing cards, and this is you'd have all those rumours come out, wouldn't you? And I just think it'd be funny, as a legacy. That's what I want my legacy to be. Like, how's he sat up in his pyramid in a graveyard in 100 years' time?
Dogs playing poker on the pictures on the wall.
We've gone down a right tangent there, haven't we? But at least now you know as well.
There we go.
And everyone else knows.
I'll make a note.
John wants to be in a pyramid when he's older.
That's fine.
Well, where do we go from there? Amazing 3D goals. Does goal setting actually work?
Yes, absolutely it does. And you have to be the right person. You have to have the right mindset. I think it's hard push for people to say they've never set a goal and achieved it, because sometimes it's going, to school or going to that interview or going to meet that girl or boy or whatever else. We don't necessarily classify those as goals because we didn't write them down.
Yeah.
But they are goals, and we've had lots of those over our years. For me, it's just a very simple format. And the way it started, I was on holiday in France with the family. We'd hired this Airbnb place, and kid's wife were asleep, and I was working away as a good entrepreneur do on the kitchen table with a laptop. And I was listening to Jim Rohn on YouTube, and I love Jim. He's fantastic, mentor for me, through the power of YouTube. I wish I'd had him like Tony Robbins did personally. But I was listening to him talk about goals, and I'd done SMART goals before, specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and time-bound. I hated the achievable and realistic part of it. I didn't want my goals to be that. I wanted them to be amazing. Yeah. And I thought, okay, there's all these other bits around it. And Jim, where he was speaking about it, I came up with this simple model, and I wanted to be able to teach school children, primary school children, because I thought if I can teach primary school children, I could probably get through to CEOs in a boardroom as well. Yeah. And the method was very simple. What's your dream? That's the first D of the 3D goals. What do you desire in life? What is it that you really want? The second one is to describe or to define it so well that anybody would know when you achieved it. I always use this analogy, and it's getting dated, so I need to come up with another one. But the in-betweeners. Simon passed his driving test. His mum and dad gave him the keys to a new car. He was really excited. He went outside and saw this yellow thing. Yeah. And his mum was pleased because it had a cassette deck. So describing the new car rather than just a new car or a new house or a new job or something. I want to save more money. Okay, well, there's a penny. You've got more than you had before. I didn't mean that. I meant, well, tell me how much. Yeah. So that's that second D of the description of it. And the third one is the date, the deadline, the target date of when you want to achieve it by. Keeping it that simple, keeping those three things together, putting the target date turns it from a dream into an amazing 3D goal. And my tagline is, why be average when you can be amazing? Because I don't want average goals. I don't want things that are just, So I started a spreadsheet, another spreadsheet, and I just put the things that I was wanting, my dreams, the description of it, and a target date. And I came up with a list of 200 different goals. And one of those was to have our own place, our own home in France, because we loved it so much, and put a date by it. And it wasn't that long after we did that we found one and we bought it, and we've been there and go back and forth, and we just love it. So multiple goals, some big, some small, and so I now use that model to help other people to set their goals. I was speaking at my son's college actually 2 weeks ago to 100 students about setting goals. They brought their piece of paper. What's funny now is you have to tell them to bring a pen because no one brings a pen, and not what's this? It's paper, to write on. So it was fantastic to hear their goals as young 16, 17-year-olds, and to see what they want to do with their lives, and I get real inspiration and energy from that.
I remember when I was in school, it was kind of like aim low, achieve your goals and avoid disappointment, which is quite a miserable way of looking at life. But like to be ambitious was frowned upon. It was kind of like, no, you're going to be an employee. This is what you're going to do. You're going to go to work 9 to 5. You're going to work and then you're going to go home again. And I never wanted that, ever wanted that. No. And it's why I try and get into schools as much as I can to try and drive that ambition. Yeah. Are you seeing that ambition in school kids at the moment, or are you seeing it kind of just missing? Like it feels like there's some there, but maybe it's not being taught enough, and the kids aren't being driven enough to me, and the education system needs to kind of tell kids that there's another route, and I don't feel they do.
No, they don't. Well, they don't want to, because they want people to go into jobs that are going to pay taxes back into the system. So we actually had our two went to primary school and really enjoyed that. Our eldest went to secondary school for a term or two and then didn't really enjoy it. So we actually homeschooled them throughout secondary school, and then the youngest did the same as well. Went back into education at A-levels and now is at university, the oldest, which is interesting. And the youngest is back in at college doing carpentry and joinery. So two different paths that they're walking, which is fantastic. But for me, yes, you're 100% right there. I mean, I do a talk to 120, 140 students. At the end, I'll get 2 or 3 that will come up and talk to me, and they're the ones I'm there for.
Yeah,
I just have to go to the 140. That's how I get in. But it's the 3 or 4 afterwards that come up to me and say, I really enjoyed that. I really like that. I'm trying to do this, and so on and so forth. The way I set goals within schools, though, is about their school journey and their potential career. Then some fun goals I try and set with people. It's quite hard to set fun goals when you're older, because there's mortgages and there's kids and there's businesses and there's health and there's all the other stuff. So it's really important to try and set them at a young age so it becomes a habit. And I try and link it with other goals. So when you've achieved that, then celebrate by doing one of these fun things. And then I always finish with them on health and fitness goals, because if you haven't got your health, then you can't do all the other things anyway. So I try and do that so that even if they're not ambitious and they don't want to own their business or do this, that and the other, that's fine. But they'll set a goal to drink more water or to take some more steps or to do something, and that's going to be good for them as well.
Yeah. I feel like writing them down is a massive part of that.
Huge.
It makes it seem more real, doesn't it? It's there in black and white now, so now you kind of feel like you have to push on. Yeah. Is that part of the process?
100%.
Documenting it.
Yeah, 100%. And from the likes of Brian Tracy, who came up with the Smart Goals thing, and other stories. Matthew McConaughey, when he wrote his book Green Lights, it was his 50-year autobiography. He's halfway, and he went back to his family home, went up into the loft, into the attic, and got out old boxes, and there was beer mats and napkins and stuff that he'd written on. And before he became famous in anything he did in acting, he'd written down that he wanted to win the Oscar for the best male actor. And then subsequently, a few years later on, he actually went on and achieved that. And by writing it down, it's so powerful. And even if and I say to the kids, write the date on the top, because some of you, it's going to go on the floor, it's going to go in the bottom of the bag, and you'll pull it out in a year's time thinking, what was that strange guy came in and talked to us about goals? But then you'll think, oh, I've achieved that, and I've done that, and I'm on my way to this one.
Yeah.
And it's so powerful, and that's why I love pen and paper, writing it down.
Yeah. From a leadership perspective then, do you feel like leaders struggle to delegate, especially in small business? Why, and why?
We've all been let down. There's not a leader out there that hasn't been let down by somebody, and it hurts, and then you have to pick up the pieces, and you're not even back at square one, you're back behind there, because you've then got to work out what they did and what they didn't do to go forward. So it always comes from a position of, it's just easier and quicker if I do it myself.
Yeah.
And
that old adage.
I've heard that so many times, and that's true. However, you're not going to grow or go very far, if you're trying to do everything by yourself, and you're going to get stressed by it as well. So the way I describe delegation in leadership is to look at the tasks that you're doing and to think, okay, am I really the only person that can do these things? And there will be a few that potentially are only you. So I use payroll as an example. You don't want to mess up people's pay.
Yeah.
I don't process it in terms of doing the accountancy side, but I'm the one that's orchestrating it to just check everything's right, because I know it's going to come back to me if it goes wrong, and then I give it to my payroll accountant lady, who's fantastic, to process it. But then there's lots of other things that don't have to be you, and I liken them to rubber balls and glass balls. So the payroll is a glass ball. If you drop it, it will smash. It's a big problem.
Yeah.
Whereas there's other tasks that are rubber balls. And if they drop them, it will bounce back up to you. So one, expect them to drop it and bounce back up. So don't give them lots. When you delegate a rubber ball, it will grow in size because you know how to do it backwards. It's the first time they're doing it and being trusted with it. So give it to them one at a time. Check in on them. Paint what done looks like. You've got to describe it so well that they know, ask them questions, because often we'll say, I want you to do X, Y, and Z, and they've heard A, B, E.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, I'm the one that didn't explain it properly. You're not the one that didn't hear it properly. It is on me. So what is it that I need to do? How do I need to translate it better so you understand it? And let's go through the process together so that you know what you're doing. I know that you're doing it well. Here's the measures in place. And when it goes wrong, fine, it's my fault. And if you're pointing the finger at someone, there's 4 pointing back and it's you. So you've got to be expecting of it not to go well to start with. And then after not very long period of time, often they then end up doing it as well. If not, and I love this, even better than when you did it. And then you start to give them another thing to do. So it's about going slower than you want to. And as entrepreneurs, we really struggle with that because we want to go on to the next thing or do something else. But certain things just take time. And Stephen Covey said it best. He said, slow is fast and fast is slow. So go slow and then you'll get there quicker than if you're trying to do it quickly.
Yeah, it's like that growing pain, isn't it? You have to accept that people aren't going to do it as well as you right now, or at least you might perceive it that way. They're probably going to do it better, but they're just not going to do it the same way that you've done it. But you just kind of have to accept that there's probably a different way at the same time, and if it means that you can do something that's more productive, then you just have to accept it. But it's hard because as a small business owner, you start doing everything. You mentioned payroll, but you do all the payments in the bank, and letting go of the bank. It's something I've always struggled with as well. Like, I still control a bank account.
Yep, me too.
It's the one thing I've tried to give it up several times. And what's that payment gone there for? Oh, I've sent it to the wrong person, and you're like, so letting go of everything is quite hard. But letting go of stuff that's maybe not quite as critical, like that glass ball, I quite like the idea of, because it's, if it does bounce and it bounces 3 times and eventually gets done in the right way, it's just a learning curve, isn't it?
One list thing, yeah. So I've actually created a to-who list, and it's something I've come up with, a physical pad again and a pen, because we've always got to-do lists going on, and it's like a to-do list. So it's, I need to do this task. And in the first column, it's who could do it.
Yeah.
And if you leave it blank because you haven't got a who yet, then it might be you need to outsource it, or you need to train somebody, or you need to hire somebody. But you're desperately trying not to put your name or initials by it. And then the end is, when do you want it done by? Because often we don't do a to-do list in chronological order of what's most important.
Absolutely never.
But it just comes out. So by doing a to-who list, you then starts to help and train you to delegate better. And I think you're right there. There's the onus of, we don't think other people could do it better. We're also scared that other people will do it even better, or find out it wasn't really that difficult in the first place. So there's a bit of pride that you have to lose as a leader, which is fine. And then also the phrase "good enough is good enough" doesn't have to be perfect in everything you do, especially in marketing. If you wait for perfect, you'll never get anything out. So good enough is good enough.
Do you think too many people procrastinate over perfection?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, lots, and especially owners and founders and people that's how they started. It's again, some things you do want to be perfect, but not very many in the grand scheme of things.
It's the fear maybe of getting it wrong.
Yeah.
So they just kind of.
But that's where we learn, and again, we've got so much wrong in our lives and our businesses and our relationships, everything else, and that's when we learn. We learn from our failures more than we do our successes.
Yeah. What is the biggest failure in there? if you look back over your career?
For me, it was trust. It was trusting people and trusting a previous owner, actually, of one of the businesses, and thought it was friendly and everything else, and it's just turned into a nightmare.
Right, okay.
Yeah,
Did he
so
stay
it's
in the
just-
business?
Yes. Again, there was a consultancy agreement, so there was something written, but just couldn't let go of it. Wasn't his business.
Lost his baby effectively and
Yeah,
didn't like the changes and
but was just rude to people and just not helpful. It would have been fine. It would have still been fine. I was happy with how that was going to work. He couldn't adjust.
right, okay.
And then it's now made it a nightmare, for me and some others. So that's the biggest lesson.
Biggest lesson learned. Why do some teams work together and other teams just don't seem to be productive? Is there any kind of thought process in why some people just gel better?
It's really hard to get good culture in any team, even in a team of 2 or 3. It can be extremely difficult. We're all different. We're all made up differently. We're all from different backgrounds, different upbringings, different education levels, different experiences, different levels of maturity, not age, but maturity, different hopes and dreams and goals. So to take all of those and everything else into the mix and then put people, strangers, in a room together, expecting them to gel and get on and be the best team ever is virtually almost impossible. So again, what you need to do is be able to be that leader, forming that culture, not accepting certain behaviours or language or ways people treat each other. It's one bad apple that spoils the whole cart, and I've seen it so many times. And then people turn to you, well, are you going to get rid of them? Or are you going to address that situation? What are you going to do about it? Because they can't.
Yeah.
But you are the only one often that can. And it's dealing with it appropriately and quickly as well to be able to adjust or remove or release with love over to somebody else to look after. And accept that it takes time. Some of my businesses, it's taken years to get the right culture in. And when you're growing a business from scratch, that's one of the benefits is you can choose who joins that team. And now with interviews, we had interviews yesterday, actually, I'm not involved in the interview process. I'm not a very good interviewer. I'm fine technically, but I'm too generous and I see the good in everybody. So I think, they'll be okay. Whereas my team members who are actually going to work with them, they're the ones that are doing the interview process.
So you bring them into the interview process now?
No, they run it. I don't do it.
Right, okay.
I don't see the CVs. I don't do the interviews. I often get introduced to them either just before or just after they've started.
Right, okay. So you're completely remote
because
from it
I'm
now.
not working with them daily.
Yeah.
And I'm not, so I trust my team to be able to make those decisions. And then, they're the ones, and we do trial days and different things, to make sure we've got the right people. And I help and guide the process to a degree, but I don't make that choice.
Yeah.
Because it's not for me to say who's going to work next to you.
How long has it taken for you to realise that you see the good in people and...
But by making the mistakes and me personally hiring too many people that I thought were good and then suffering for it.
Interesting.
So a number of years, and then more recently in the last couple of years, I'm not involved.
Just not
in the process.
involved,
Yeah.
just step back from it.
Yeah.
Awesome, cool. Quick fire round. So we do this with every guest at the end.
Cool.
Just to kind of get some interesting bits. You've got maybe 10, 15 seconds to answer each one. All right. Biggest business lesson?
Don't trust everybody, even very close friends.
Okay, cool. Best decision you've ever made?
The second acquisition, fantastic. One of the unicorn acquisitions that I've made. Wonderful.
Okay, and then the worst?
Letting people stay or influence others too long, like that conversation we just had.
Okay, cool. And then one thing you'd change that you've done over your career?
I think be bolder, be more, direct and do things quicker rather than waiting.
So speed of delivery and stuff.
Yeah.
Okay. Advice for 20-year-old James?
Listen to people you trust in a senior position or in a mentoring position. Surround yourself with good people always. Be the dumbest and the poorest person in any room you go into.
Cool. Good one, that. And then the best book you've ever read?
As we're talking about leadership, I always go to It's Your Ship, SHIP. Fantastic leadership book by a captain of a US Navy ship. And I won't spoil it for you, but if you get the audio book, it's even better than the real book because he reads it to you.
Awesome. Okay, I'll get that downloaded. James, it's been a delight today, so thanks for coming in.
Brilliant. Thanks, John.
Cool.